Hello, this is Mike Van Meter, and welcome to the Recovery is Possible podcast. And I want to thank you for joining me. You can reach us at our Facebook site, which is also called Recovery is Possible, or our website, which is vanmeterwellnesssolutions.com. So this podcast exists to educate the public about addiction, remove the stigma associated with addiction, and offer help and support to those suffering from addiction. And guys, we have a special guest today, and I just want to talk about how I came across Charlie Engle. As many of you know, I'm interning at a facility up in Maryland, and Charlie came up and spoke to the patient population there regarding his book, which is called Running Man, a memoir of ultra endurance, and it was released in September of 2017. You can get it on Amazon or in bookstores and all kinds of different vendors, but he spoke to the folks up there, and I was fascinated by Charlie because I have talked about this before on this podcast, that one of the things that I did when I got into recovery myself was really kind of revisit physical fitness. Not that it was new to me, because it wasn't, but my drinking had really taken that away to a large extent. And then I wanted to regain my health. And as I work in this field, I have found that physical fitness and exercise is really something that a lot of people, when they get into recovery, get back into. And sometimes get back into it with a vengeance, let's just say. And I think what you're going to see with Charlie is that's exactly what happened with him. But he's going to talk about his story and how we have come to know him as Charlie Engle, the man, the ultra runner that he is, and just talk about that and how running has saved his life. It saved the lives of many others, to include myself. And then, what he's done, how it's helped, and what the future is going to hold. So with that, Charlie, welcome to the program.
Mike, thank you so much for having me. Thanks for the great intro.
Well, I'll tell you, Charlie, you have a very interesting story. And anybody that has gotten into recovery, we all have interesting stories and their life-saving stories. But yours takes a bit of a different twist, and that is, running. I go out and I've run. I've actually, just in all honesty, I have done a couple of ultramarathons myself. Now, we're talking 50 miles. I've done 50-mile runs. Which sounds like it would be sort of a warm-up for the things that you're doing. But tell us a little bit about yourself and how did we get here to this point in your running career?
Yeah, thank you. Well, it is, I certainly wouldn't call it, any sort of a chance situation as far as I'm concerned. I did grow up with running in my background. I was above average in high school as a runner, but not good enough to really take me to any big schools to run in college or anything like that. But I grew up with the knowledge that my grandfather had been the head track coach at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, where I ultimately went to school. And he was the coach there for 40 years and was an All-American himself, and he died when I was young. But I think that the way it, as it is with many families, I sort of grew up being told I was going to be a runner like my grandfather, and I think that especially for an addict, it's interesting how we hold on to, I don't know, little tidbits. I call them shards almost, that embed themselves in our psyche, and they're just sitting there waiting for us to explore them. And so flash forward many years later, I spent 10 years after college, basically the only running I did was, from the police or, from responsibility or, that's what it felt like. And not really, but, it just was I wasn't a runner per se. Yeah. And yet when I finally got sober at 29 and the wheels had really come off in my life, and I made a decision that, I needed to change things. I went to a meeting, that night, the night that I made that decision, and got up the next morning and I put on my running shoes and went for a run. And it was awful. It was 2 or 3 gut-wrenching, painful, ugly miles, but it lit something in me, and I decided I would go to a meeting every day for 30 days, and I would run every day for 30 days, and at the end of 30 days, I saw no reason to stop. And I ultimately ended up doing those two things for 3 straight years without missing a day. So I went to a meeting and I ran every day for 3 years. And, and it opened my life to so many experiences. It opened my body to this realization that I had so much more to learn and also to offer. And, in those first 3 years, I ran 30 or so marathons. And as I jokingly say, because I obviously had that whole addiction thing under control. And, and I ran my ass off. And I think I was running to actually try to get rid of the addict. Like I sort of wanted to kill that guy because I thought he was trying to kill me. And what I learned, in fact, was all those addictive qualities and that obsessive nature that I had in me. If I took that power and pointed it to positive things, that I could actually, build a really great life for myself. And, I'm happy to say that that's what's happened.
Well, and that's a really good question. And I know that it's a very common question that you get. And that is, hey, have you just replaced one addiction with another? How do you address that when people ask you about that?
Yeah, there's no such thing as, seriously, there's no such thing as, it's such a popular thing to say, and it's just nonsense. There's no such thing as, I'm sure there are people who can become, and I'm using air quotes that you can't see here, addicted to exercise. Almost nobody knows anyone like that, and usually it comes across as this very strange criticism of sorts. Addiction is what I used to do for 10 years, and addiction is what, you and I both know what that looks like. If you're doing something that is actually healthy, it would be like eating too much healthy food. Oh, you're just addicted to healthy food. Oh, well, okay. So I'm sorry, I guess, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do with that. And, and there's this, it's a very funny thing, Mike, and I found myself talking to my wife yesterday about this, but you look around general society, 70% obesity here in the United States, and everybody's a critic of everything, yet there is so little just personal responsibility taken for things like, your own health and exercise and nutrition. And, everybody wonders why our healthcare system is broken and costs so much. All you have to do is look at pictures of us from the 40s and 50s as compared to pictures today. And it's because people don't take personal responsibility for their own health. They want somebody else to do it for them. And so I always tell people, if somebody feels better about saying, oh, well, look at that guy, he's just addicted to running, as if it's some sort of criticism, I'll own that. And as I always say, I never got a DUI while running, nor did I lose my car, like behind a dumpster after a running binge. But I sure did that stuff after drinking and drugging.
Well, it's funny that you say that, Charlie, because I've actually had the same thing asked of me, in working with people when I've done peer counseling, and now that I'm in the counseling world, and people know that I do a fair amount of running and cycling myself. Okay. And people will say, well, Mike, didn't you just give up one addiction for another? And it's funny that you use sort of the same analogy that I do. And that is this, I've never had, if I'm working with a client, I'll say, I've never had a boss come up to me and say, something, Mike, I've noticed that you go run 5 miles every day. Okay. I've noticed that you went, and I'm going to talk to you about this. Here's the deal. If you don't stop running 5 miles a day, we're going to have to get rid of you. I've never had that conversation with a boss. Likewise, and I'll even tell you this, it's funny when people come into treatment, the things that they become concerned with. I've even had people say, well, Mike, I go to AA meetings, and I notice that people drink a lot of coffee. I'm very concerned about that. Do you think that I'll just become addicted to caffeine? Now, I'm not saying that there aren't problems with that. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, or a good thing. But I've never had a boss come up to me and say, Mike, I've noticed that you drink a lot of coffee at work when you're here.
Yeah.
Listen,
Yeah.
if you don't cut back on your coffee, we're going to have to let you go. I've not had that conversation. Now, you can have another discussion about the health of drinking all that coffee, but the point being is, it seems to point away from the central problem, and that is, I have had people say, look, if you don't stop your drinking, we're gonna take you away from your, you're gonna lose this position. Or if you don't stop drugging or inappropriately using the internet, we're gonna take your job away from you. So it's funny that people become focused on the wrong thing. And I also I remember one individual I was talking to who literally, it was a couch potato. This person had no physical activity in his life whatsoever, and a horrible diet. And I remember him saying to me, because I said to him, hey, look, let's really talk about your health. Let's try to get you moving. Let's try to clean up your diet, and let's start exercising. And this particular individual said to me, well, I'm concerned that I'm going to become an exercise addict if we move in that direction. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting, because right now there is no physical activity in your life whatsoever. And now, if you get to the point where in the next few months that your family's falling apart because you're not going to your kid's soccer game on Friday because your training plan says you have to do a 12-mile run, and then you miss the Saturday activities because you got to do a 3-hour bike ride followed by another run. We can have a discussion at that point, because you're missing out on your family activities. But I think we're a long way off from that point right now, in early recovery. And so I've always found that sort of an interesting, I think it would have to get pretty extreme before you start developing lifelong problems now. But I will say this, that if you are an individual that is not participating in life activities, family activities, that might be a discussion to have. Would you agree with that, or what are your thoughts on that, Charlie?
Yeah, sure. You certainly, especially if you're in recovery, family should become a priority, simply because it probably wasn't before. But I would also argue that I've lived by the mantra for decades now that if you don't feel good, you can't get well.
Yeah.
So that same guy who was asking you, saying he's concerned about becoming an exercise addict, I'm going to venture a guess that he's watching 4 or 5 hours of TV a day, every single day. How is that not escapism and addictive behavior? And yet there's absolutely no, and I mean no, benefit to that. So, sure, I guess maybe you could watch a TV show with your kids. You know what else you can do? You can go outside and play with them.
Yeah. Which is still activity.
How about that for a novel idea? Is attraction rather than promotion, right? Is to actually lead by example. And it is a funny thing. I've never ever had that sort of criticism. It always feels like a criticism to me, but I've never had anyone level that wasn't someone that was, not in good shape and not taking very good care of themselves. Mm-hmm. And I mean, look, I'm listening to, In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts from, by Gabor Mate right now. And it is the most amazing and fascinating book. It's not my first time through, about addiction, and, his language around, how a person becomes addicted, what actually is the definition of addicted. And, there was a fascinating thing that he said about, Native Americans in particular there was no such thing as addiction. Like it wasn't a word, it wasn't a thing, it wasn't something that they even had a relationship with until they were colonialized, and it was an interesting thing that without the substances and the stresses and the behavioral changes that we're really not meant to do those things, but we're searching for some kind of escape from our pain, whatever that is, and that's what addiction is about. It's not about, of course, as you well know, the actual act of drinking or drugging or the substance even. It's about, for whatever reason, our desire to, escape from the pain. And so, sure, I still use running, to this day. It's my happy place
Yeah.
where I go to get my head together, to think about important things, to level out my emotions, to stay good, in good health. And, yeah, so I just, I do believe that, going back to something you said in your introduction, one of the things that, I'm really interested in pushing farther with the addiction industry is, a person will go into treatment and pretty much immediately be sat into a plastic chair, and talk therapy will begin almost on day one.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, and I'm not by any means saying that that's not, talk therapy is a huge part of getting help and getting healthy, but equal attention should be paid to the human body.
I agree with you there. Absolutely.
Yeah. And usually in most treatment centers, even one like Ashley, as amazing as they are, and they have this incredible gym, and they have, and a lot of treatment centers have all of this, it's not mandatory. It's not compulsory to exercise. It's voluntary. And look, unless someone that would be like saying it's voluntary to go to your group therapy session or to your one-on-one counseling. Like, it diminishes physical movement in a way, and somehow says that it's not as important as the other parts of your counseling. And I see it differently. I think that is it's one of the reasons that, people really struggle with staying sober long term, because when hard times hit, I understand you need to call your sponsor, you need a therapist, you need all these things. But if you've learned how to go for a walk, or how to do some yoga, or how to do something that, is, feels good, helps with the emotions that you might be going through, and is also good for your body, I think that that's a skill that it should be compulsory, not voluntary.
That's actually something I've been thinking about for quite some time. And I know when I went through treatment, there actually was not a gym there initially. And I actually had a counselor that I would go out and run this loop. And I actually had a counselor come up to me and dissuade me from doing that, thinking that I was just replacing and trying to avoid some of the discussions. I thought that, and even back in those early days, I thought that was kind of unusual, because I realized even early on the benefit, like you just mentioned, how you use running, that you feel better, it clears your head, you do your important thinking. I noticed that early on, that no matter how bad of a day, like let's face it, you and I both have been in recovery for quite some time. You, in your case, longer than me. But the point is that just because you're in recovery doesn't mean you don't have bad days. I've probably had more tragedy and bad things happen to me in recovery than I did when I was drinking. And So what do you do on those days? Is that the same with you as well?
Totally the same.
Yeah.
And the difference is we get to be fully present and accounted for, to be there to face those hardships, without needing a substance. But I would argue that, when the stress hits me, it's not always a run. Sometimes I just want to go out the door, have a little fresh air, go for a walk. And if that has become, like this coping mechanism for me, which it absolutely is, there quite literally is no downside. Because if I sit in my living room or in a chair and I think about whatever this difficult situation that might be going on in my life, or ad nauseum, I'm talking to other people on the phone, or we're having arguments with loved one, whatever the stress, wherever it's coming from, it's just that's actually not healthy for me. And yet, if I'll just get out and clear my head for a minute and have a nice walk, I don't care if it's, as I like to say, there's no such thing as bad weather. There's only bad clothing. And, you just have to be ready and to use it. So if you didn't learn to do it, while you were in treatment or in early recovery, it's harder to learn it later. So I would love to see the treatment industry really embrace the mind-body connection. I think you may not know this, but I am now the co-founder of a program called Freedom from Addiction, and my partner is Deepak Chopra. And so Deepak and I are launching this new program next year, and there's a lot of aspects to it. We can talk about this in another conversation, but he understands very clearly the mind-body connection, maybe better than anybody on the planet. With meditation and mindfulness, and the need for he doesn't run, but he walks and does yoga and Tai Chi and movement, and he connects these to meditations that he does, and learning those skills. I mean, I could only hope that I could ever be as good at them as he is, but I do believe that for those people who are willing to take those extra steps, I do believe that there is great relief. There's a solid foundation for them that will add to their whatever avenue they've chosen for recovery, whether it's 12-step recovery or there's other choices out there. I always say that we all do it our own individual way, and it's never to say one way is the absolute right way, and yet the important part is if you're struggling, you need to take action. It's not going to go away on its own magically.
That is so true. That is so true. I'll just share with you this week, and I didn't mention this to you before we came on the air. I just came out of surgery myself. I had and there's going to be a correlation here with this discussion. So I had gallbladder surgery, and what had happened was about 5 years ago, I had some gallstones that came up. And at the time they said, look, you don't need to take your gallbladder out right now. It's fine, but the gallstones are still there. Well, then 5 years rolls by until this week, and sure enough, one of the gallstones got trapped in the duct, and it got backed up, and it just got backed up to the point where it was just so painful, and we had to remove it. And the surgeon said to me, well, it was a good thing that you came in when you did, because this was not going to get any better. That had to come out. And looking back on it, I could have avoided this whole ordeal that I had this week had I addressed the problem 5 years ago when the issue came up. And I think that there's a correlation between my experience this week and recovery, and that is, if you're listening to this podcast and you're suffering, or someone that suffers, the issue has to be dealt with. And the sooner you deal with the issue, the sooner you will get well. But the problem's not going to go away unless, like you just said, Charlie, it is addressed. The issue has to be addressed, doesn't it?
It does. And, I always make the joke that there is no surgery for this,
No.
Because unless we remove our brains, that might do it. But it seems a little counterproductive, to a long and happy life. But it is that old saying, right? If not now, when, kind of a thing. And the holidays, I think, really bring it out in people too, where there's this anxiety that goes with the holidays, for people who are struggling with addiction or who are struggling in recovery, because it's, these are times for a lot of triggers. And one of the things that, that I say all the time is that, what happens to us isn't nearly as important as what we do about it. And so often, one of the other things that occurred to me the other day, and I do speak on this sometimes, is, and this is almost back to our first part of our conversation about, people sort of saying, seems like you switched addictions, or in my case, people came up to me in early recovery and literally said to me, hey, dude, you don't need to quit. You just need to slow down. Like you just got to I'm like, have you been watching me? Like if I could slow down, don't you think I would have done that by now? And it took a while for me to really understand that these were people who loved me. They might have been family members or friends, but they were all people that I drank with and that I used with. And guess what? They didn't want to lose their drinking buddy. So for them, I'm not saying they weren't concerned about me, but they were more concerned about themselves than they were about me, which is just human nature, right? I mean, I don't even blame them for that. But, misery really does love company. And the last thing they wanted to see, even though they cared about me, was me get better and them forced to sort of examine potentially their own existence and the kind of life, they're leading. And like 5 of my drinking buddies from back in the day are now sober. And like once every 3 or 4 years, and 3 of them died. Not those 5 are sober, 3 died. And the ones who got sober, each time they came to me, individually and said, I wish I had done this, so much sooner. I wanted to do it when you did it because I knew I had a problem, but I wasn't ready. And I always say, you nailed it right there. You just weren't ready. You needed to suffer a little more. But you don't have to anymore. And now you've got this incredible universe open to you, and all you have to do every day is show up, and your life will by default get so much better.
Yeah. I've often heard it said in recovery circles that your life can't not get better. It won't solve all your problems. All your problems aren't going to go away. And like I just mentioned, I've had probably more tragedy happen to me in sobriety than prior, but my ability to deal with it was so much better. And most importantly, I was able to be there for those that were in my circle that were suffering, really, really suffering. Whereas I would not been present for those people prior. Yeah. Many of your problems, I would say about 80% of the problems that you have in your life are due to your addiction, directly related to your addiction. They will likely resolve themselves to some extent. And then the other 20% or so, you'll be able to better deal with anyway. That's what I'd like to tell people.
Everything you said right there is just it's so true. And we, people are afraid to make those changes. But, and for me, as I'm sure my story, it's all right there on my website, and we can talk about this even another day sometime. But, at 19 years clean and sober, I ended up going to federal prison. And, it's part of my story. And while I certainly wasn't happy about it, like most challenging things in life, it has become, now that I'm nearing 30 years clean and sober, it has actually become a deeply embedded part of me that I simply had to go through. And fault or no fault, or fair or no fair, or unfair, really doesn't matter. Like, those stories are actually irrelevant. Things happen to us in sobriety that are challenging and difficult. And I tell people often that one of the reasons I've run so much, I've run more than 100 miles, more than 50 times. And obviously I ran almost 5,000 miles across the Sahara Desert. And that was 2 marathons a day, every day for over 100 days in a row. And I've done some, what to most people would seem like really crazy things. And I get the question regularly, why do you keep doing this? What are you chasing? As if I'm some, broken, hollow person that's desperately seeking some elusive pot of gold. And I have, I try to always be nice to people. I'm like, look, you have it all wrong. I now have the ability to be a seeker. I get to be curious and adventurous. And I've never run 100 miles when I didn't want to quit at some point. And that's actually the whole point, is I want to put myself voluntarily in a situation where I'll reach a place where I can't possibly go on, and then I figure out how to keep going. And I can take that lesson in a controllable situation like a run, that lesson of getting past that hard moment, translates directly to when I have, an argument with somebody at work, or a fallout with my spouse, or some other hard thing that happens. Those lessons in running teach me that if I just let that moment pass by, I don't have to like throw a hand grenade into my whole life just because of that hard moment. And that's what running teaches me. It puts me in a place where I get to a place that's just too hard to keep going, but then I find a way to keep going, and I get to use that later.
And that's kind of like recovery, isn't it? Because those of us that have struggled with addiction, we have gotten to that point. How many people do you know, and yourself included, myself included, you got to the point where you say, I cannot go through life. I can't go through life without drinking. I just can't do it. But then you come to the realization that you can't continue doing it either, right? Yeah. And you reach that hard spot where you're just like, I can't go on. What do I do now? And you have to figure out a way to go beyond that point. And so that's the same analogy that you're describing here, is there has to come a point where you figure it out. You have to figure out a way to get through that hard spot. And that's what we're talking about.
Well, and we have the tools. And just like in a run, when I feel like crap at 62 miles of a 100-miler, guess what? I probably need to eat. I need to drink. Maybe I need to slow down and walk for a little bit. Maybe all these tools, they're at my disposal, and I know what they are. I just have to use them. Recovery is the exact same way.
That's right.
You need to call a supportive person, talk about this, take action. Don't just sit in this terrible space, because that's a dangerous spot. You know what to do. And if you choose not to do it, that genuinely is a self-sabotaging choice. And you are at much greater risk of dooming yourself to another relapse and another round of this, senseless, punishment that we all know as recovering addicts. And it really is. It's a celebration, I think.
And you know what? And you're not doing a race like going across the Sahara, 100-mile race, a 50-mile race even. I know even the races that I've done, when you're doing anything beyond 30, certainly 50 miles, certainly the types of events that you're doing, you're not doing it alone. Number one, you have to have a team of people. You have to have a plan. Yeah. You have to have nutrition. You have to have, what about when things go wrong? The weather goes bad. You get injured. Clothing. The things that you can't plan for. Nutrition. On and on and on. There's so many analogies to recovery. The same thing here. We have a team in recovery. We have a plan in recovery. We're going into the holiday season. If you're in early recovery, you have to have a plan going into the family events, the business events, the things that you have to do. You want to have that plan, the support, the team, the people that are, what if things go wrong? What's your escape plan? How are you going to address that? There are so many life lessons, recovery life lessons, in the type of work that you're doing, that it's, that would be a book in and of itself that you could write about the parallels between doing an ultra marathon like you do and how that equates to long-term sobriety.
Yeah, no, you said that incredibly well, because at that same 62 miles when the wheels are coming off, guess what I'm thinking? I'm thinking, God, I have to do this for 38 more miles. And it's the same thought when, you're struggling in recovery and you say that dreaded statement to yourself, I'm never going to drink again, because that's what it feels like in that moment, when in fact, all I know with the run, all I have to run is the next mile. The next step. I don't have to run the other 38 miles now. I can only run the one that's right in front of me. Mm-hmm. And if I do that one, I get to do the next one. And, I also think, what's interesting about the analogy, and I am certain, given your background, that you will relate to this entirely. Comfort is incredibly overrated. And we, we tend as human beings, and certainly in modern society, we most of the things that we acquire in our lives are somehow meant to make our lives more comfortable. We might couch it as we're making our lives better, but usually it's something to make it easier. And there's just so little value usually in the things that make our lives easier. The lessons all come if you sit someone down and ask them point blank, tell me the three things that have really, helped you become the person that you are. Everyone will choose three challenging situations from their life, because nobody became who they are from the easy things that happened to them. That's just not the way we're built. So a greater appreciation for our hardship. It's not about patting ourselves on the back, but saying, you know what? That's right. I got through that. And here I am still alive and kicking to tell the story. And now it's my responsibility to use this incredible gift I've given to myself to, not only to make myself better, but to do hopefully what you and I are doing this very minute, which is service to others. Because I'm going to guess that is absolutely, you wouldn't be doing this podcast if it wasn't about, giving away your skill, your knowledge, and what you've learned in recognition that is what is going to continue to help you in your recovery. Yeah.
And in helping others, we help ourselves.
Yeah. It's the funny thing. Act. I tell people all the time, I'm like, the most selfish thing you can do is actually go down to the soup kitchen on Thanksgiving Day, or to go whatever. You think you're helping somebody else. Trust me, you are, but you're giving yourself so many bonus chips and good feelings that, that you can carry with you for, as long as you need them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's absolutely true. And we have a responsibility, I think, if you're one of those that's been blessed with long-term sobriety, it's almost an obligation to help others, point them in the direction, not tell people what to do, but at least share your experience. We talk about experience, strength, and hope. That I got to this point, and in my case, sobriety did not come easy to me. There are people that go to a meeting or go to treatment, and the first time they go, they're on to long-term sobriety. That was not my story, certainly not my story. And what I've tried to do is say, when I figured out like the magic sauce for me, to simply explain, here's what I did. And if this works for you, if it's something that you can relate to, great, I'll pass that along. I'm not going to tell you to do it. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I just know that this is what I did. And if there's anything that you can glean from that, then please, get something from it. And I think that the same is true in your story. And what I really like about your story is you are demonstrating what a sober person, somebody that is tapping into their capabilities, what is possible with the human mind and the human body, that absolutely would not be possible if you were still drinking and drugging. But when you take away drugs and alcohol and you tap into what is your potential and explore what that is, because I don't even think you know what your full potential is yet, but at least you're going out on the horizon and looking for it. But that would not even be on the table if you were still drinking and drugging today.
No, I mean, I've never said it better myself than the way you just said it. And it is, again, look, I have this hopefully never ending desire to continue to explore, this world that I inhabit. And for me, that is through cultural exploration. I want to see every corner of this world if I can. And I like to see it from a bike seat or from my, the soles of my feet, and not in the back of a tourist bus, because that's just not my style. And, I want to experience it. And, without sobriety, and I don't mean the obvious, like without sobriety, I wouldn't be here. That's very true and very obvious. But what I really mean is without the curiosity that I gained through sobriety and the recognition that, I knew so little when I came into sobriety, and when I finally turned my life around. It was like I was a newborn at 30 years old. And geez, in 30 years, I've learned so much, but I've also recognized there's so much more to do. And my physical way of doing it is through movement, but it isn't about the movement. You and I, I'll tell you, one final, quick story, which you I think are already aware of, but my next big project, and this has been growing for 10 years now. I mean, it didn't happen overnight, but I made a decision about 10 years ago that I was going to try to go from the lowest place on the planet, which is the Dead Sea, to the top of Mount Everest, which of course is the highest place on the planet. And so to do that, I'm actually going to swim across the Dead Sea from Israel to Jordan. I'm going to run about 2,000 miles across Saudi Arabia and Oman to the tip of Oman. I'm going to row across the Indian Ocean about 800 miles to Mumbai, India, where I'll get on a mountain bike and ride to Everest Base Camp. And from there, it's just like 2 or 3 miles, just happens to be like straight up. But, it's this metaphor for this journey that we've all been on. We are a never ending cycle of low places and high points. And, I have been dreaming and scheming towards this for over 10 years now. And interestingly, it has actually not come to pass, but, the foundation is laid. I have the support that I need, most of it at this point. That journey will begin January of 2023. So I have about a year still to physically and mentally get prepared and work on logistics. But the point of that whole story is people get hooked into the physical part of it. Oh my God, I can't, it's 5,000 miles, and all of the hardships physically is what they think about. All I think about are the amazing cultural experiences I'm going to have along the way, the people I get to meet, because those are the things that embed. Nobody wants to see me run all the way across the Arabian desert. I mean,
it's not exactly a spectator event, right?
No, I'm like, after about 5 minutes of that, it's like, okay, what else you got? And it's like, okay, I mean, they might check in occasionally and be like, oh, what if that guy's still alive? But beyond that, if there's not more to it, and that's how I feel as an athlete. Yeah, I want to go out there and I want to scrape away the kind of the craziness of daily life as I know it and go into the wilderness and do this thing. Like, that's what I look forward to, is that leaving my phone behind and not answering emails every day and not doing any of those things, but focusing on this continuous forward movement, which again, most of us, if we could in our sobriety eliminate sort of the pressures of daily life and just focus on moving forward, then recovery would actually be maybe a little easier, or we'd be able at least to focus on it. But that's not reality. It's not the planet we live on. We all have these pressures, and we are going to hit those inevitable hard parts. And so who you are as a human being is only revealed, in fact, when you get to those tough spots. And that's when you get a chance to sort of see not just what you're made of. And I don't mean in some macho way, but I mean more in a spiritual, emotional, mental way. You get a chance to test yourself. And, life tests us every single day, but sometimes doing it voluntarily will teach you lessons that you can't learn otherwise.
Yeah, and I really love what you said. I just wrote this down as a matter of fact. Who you are as a human being is only revealed in the hard spots of life. And I think that is so true. And I know that in recovery that is true. And other people's character is revealed in those hard spots. I know when I came into recovery, I think recovery strips life down to its basic elements. You find out who your friends are, that's for sure. You find out who's important, who you're important to, who's important to you, and who you can count on and who you can't. And it's because that is hard. Life is hard. And it is in those spots in your life where your character and other people's character is truly revealed. And I love that. I just love that you're doing this human adventure. And that is just, I'm looking forward to hearing about this. And one other thing, before I let you go, because I know that you have to go, you have another celebration coming up this coming summer having to do with your sobriety anniversary. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, gosh, thanks for asking. Yeah, so I asked the folks at Ashley because I like them so much, and I am sort of an ambassador of sorts for them, even though it's not where I went, but I just have a great respect for what they do. I asked them if they'd be interested in kind of hosting my sobriety run. And what I mean by that is every year on my sober birthday, I run for the same number of hours to equal the years that I've been sober. So in this case, and I'm not one to normally project ahead because that's dangerous, but assuming I keep my act together, I will hit 30 years July 23rd of next year. And so I will run on the loop around Ashley for 30 hours. And I think we're going to have 1,000 or so people on campus there. And they're not there to honor my sobriety. What I'm asking is that people consider coming to honor their own sobriety, or if they're not someone in recovery, to honor the person who didn't make it, who didn't survive this disease, or whatever it is that they want to honor. And I think we're going to have great music. We're going to have great talks. Deepak Chopra is going to come. We're going to have, who knows, there might be 30 hours of meetings, 30 hours of yoga, all kinds of stuff going on there. And I always say it is important to celebrate milestones and then get back to work. This is one case where, I get to celebrate and party in my style. And so you're invited, and you can, I know you just had surgery, but as you get yourself in shape, and I tell people you can come walk, you can come, you can do whatever you want. It's not about coming to run. That's my thing. And if you are a runner and you want to come run with me, then come do that. But that's not what it has to be.
Well, as you get to know me, Charlie, I think what you're going to find is I will probably be running with you during those 30 hours. I don't like things like surgery slow me down. That's not how I'm made up.
I can tell. It would be my pleasure to have you out there.
Yeah.
The greatest conversations happen on the move.
Yeah.
I make jokes all the time that I still have a therapist after all these years, but I'll only talk to her if we're either on a walk together or we're walking and we're both on the phone, because the brain operates better, the body feels better, and I think it's a way to be in touch with your true feelings. And so this is going to be a genuine, enormous celebration. And if people go to my website, it's actually, that event's not up there yet, but there's a lot of other stuff about my Dead Sea to Everest project. And, there's blogs and videos and podcasts and so forth that are on the site, that if anyone wants to know more, then of course they can. I sort of, I don't do a great job of social media, but I do my best. And, so I try to bring people along on the journey with me if they care to. Mine is very real. Mine is not one of those social media accounts where everything is awesome all the time.
Yeah.
because that's not how life works.
Yeah. Well, Charlie, I've really enjoyed talking with you. I really appreciate you coming on the program. I really do. And
anytime.
So, folks, the book is Running Man, a memoir of ultra endurance. Running Man, a memoir of ultra endurance. The documentary that's out there is Running the Sahara, and that's narrated by Matt Damon. And then also, of course, Charlie's website is charlieengle.com. That's Charlie Engle. That's ENGLE.com. And, of course, you're on Facebook as well. Any other things that you want to plug, or any other way that our listeners can get hold of you if you'd like to chat with them?
Yeah, that's it really. And on my website, my email and my phone number are right there. So I'm the easiest person to find. So if someone ever wants to reach out, personally and ask a question, whether it's about running or recovery or some other thing, then by all means, I encourage that and I do my best to answer. And, that's what keeps me sober, is getting a chance to, not, as you said very eloquently earlier, it's not our job to tell anybody else how to live their life or even how to manage their sobriety. But if we use attraction rather than promotion, and we let other people see the things that have helped make us successful thus far, maybe they'll find something of value. And that's what I hope to achieve through, all of those different pieces of media.
Yeah. Well, thanks again. Thanks again for coming on. And guys, as I'd like to say, I don't represent any group. I don't represent anyone other than myself. And my only purpose in giving this information is to share with you what I've done, because it's helped me, and maybe it will help you too. And the same is true with Charlie. So if I've said anything
Absolutely.
that doesn't apply to you or you don't agree with, then just discard it. But try to take any information that you can use for yourself and help others as well. Because that's what we do in recovery, and we help ourselves along the way, and we help to impart the knowledge that we've gained to others as well. So with that, please visit our Facebook page, Recovery is Possible, and our website, VanMeterWellnessSolutions.com. Let me know if there's anything talk to me about how I'm doing. Let me know if there's any topic that you're interested in hearing about, because I'd love to hear from you, and I know Charlie will as well. So take care, and guys, we will see you next time.